Welcome to the Long Take Review, where college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Subchakche-Bankard, and I'm here with just some really chill friends that want to go to trivia night. First, he's just got really vulnerable here, okay? It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
Come on, it's a joke. I'm just joking. Okay, fine, I'm not joking. Deal with it. I'm doing great, Jen. How are you?
No, I'm doing just fine. A little bit more creeped out than I was a minute ago, but that's intended, I think. And he's our little food critic. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
What would be so bad? What's so bad about being with me? Hi, Jen. It's good to be here.
We're happy to be here with you, Greg, but I don't think that's what you meant. And last but not least, she's not your freaky Nikki. It's the Long Take Review's horror correspondent, friend of the show. We're so happy she's here, Sarah Hastings. How's it going, Sarah?
Do you like me? Because if you do, now's the time to tell me. Hi, Jen. I'm doing great. I'm absolutely shocked about the line Greg picked, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Hopefully it was ironic.
Yeah.
Hoping it's ironic.
That's a tough one.
All right. So, dear listeners, those were all references to the film we are here to review today. One of actually two horror films dominating the box office right now, Obsession, the other one being Backrooms. What a time. In fact, the film is doing so well at the box office that they decided to postpone the digital release on PVOD indefinitely, apparently. This is something PT told me earlier today. And it's also, I think, since E.T. in 1982, the only film to have increased its box office percentage in weekend 2 and 3. So it is just like the hot ticket at the movies right now. It is written, directed by YouTuber Curry Barker, and Obsession shows us what happens when a young man named Bear makes a wish about his longtime crush. And I was trying to be intentionally vague, though if you see a trailer or any marketing materials for this movie, you will know more than that, I would say. If you are listening to us for the first time, we will have a spoiler-free section designed for those who haven't seen it. And with a very clear alert, we'll shift into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. PT, if listeners love us so much after listening to this episode, what can they do?
If they want to talk to us, want to speak with us, they should follow the Long Take Review wherever they get their podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and more. Wherever you're listening right now, you can find us there. Excuse me. You can also follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at the Long Take Review. You can also find us on Letterboxd. You can look for the account at LTR Pod, or you can search for the hashtag LTR Pod to see what each of us individually has been watching. Jen?
Thanks, PT. So we are almost ready to get into our review of Obsession. But first, we wanted to kind of take a bird's eye view, since this is kind of a pretty great moment the past few weeks for horror, to do kind of like a temperature check and talk about the year in horror so far. And obviously, like, Sarah's here, so we have to take advantage of her knowledge and expertise. Greg, I'm going to kick things over to you, since out of all of the rest of us, you probably have seen the most horror movies.
Yeah, we are definitely going to do some measuring here about who's seen more. But I bet Sarah has me beat despite having seen a lot. So, Sarah, I want to offer my thesis, which is horror has been a reliable chunk of the box office for a long time. But let's just say, especially in the last 5 years, it's like every other genre is stumbling and horror continues on. But even despite that, it's been nuts how many horror movies have come out this year. And I think there was a point somewhere in March where I was like, I think this is my 4th or 5th weekend with a brand new horror movie to see. So I will offer that maybe in mid-April, I would have been like, maybe it's lost its shine. Maybe these aren't doing as well. But as Jen alluded to in her introduction, it came roaring back in May, and we certainly can't dispute it. So all of that is to say, why horror? Why this much? Why are we not getting sick of it?
Well, I agree. It's been a kind of There's just been so much stuff coming out. I feel like so many horror movies came out to the theater and to streaming in May that I've just been having trouble keeping up with them myself. I think horror continues to be a space where people can really explore new and interesting and weird ideas in ways that I think some other genres can can limit, right? I feel like there's been a lot of conversation in the past few decades about like, we're not making comedies anymore. People aren't making rom-coms anymore. Dramas are all so like, heavy and stuff. Horror continues to be a space where you can like be so creative and explore cool ideas and cool techniques. And I feel like a lot of young independent directors are really kind of finding their feet in horror right now, and there are just a lot of exciting things happening here, and there are like kind of the little cottage industries of horror popping up in other places in the world. There's a ton of great Australian horror kind of cooking up right now. There's some Irish horror that's really exciting. So I think we're seeing people using the kind of genre space of horror to kind of cut their teeth a little bit and make a mark and establish themselves. I think there's a lot of new voices that are kind of coming up. Oh no. In the chat, we are deciding whether to interrogate Jen over Irish horror, but we'll leave it. We'll leave it for now. I'm gonna let PT take that one on for today until we do Halloween 3. But I think horror is just such a creative space that is still kind of, you can do exciting stuff on a kind of low budget. So you can do like the film we're talking about today was made for under $1 million. And Barker's first film was made for $800, which I also watched and kind of prep for today's conversation. Now, I don't know what that $800 covers. I'd kind of like to see the receipts on that, but I think it's an exciting time to kind of see what people are cooking up in this weird liminal space.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that's perfectly well said. That I think it's the combination of the low budgets and the guaranteed audience, right? The fact that people will show up for, I'm thinking in recent years of something like Skinamarink, which is probably the weirdest experience I've had in the theater, maybe ever. And those kind of ultra low budget, but you can get people out to that. And I guess my follow-up question is like, my only thought on this is, why February? Why were we doing this in February, March?
I feel like horror has always kind of shown up in that ditch where people aren't releasing like the good stuff that is going to come in better box office slots. So I feel like January, February, I feel like people talk about that as kind of a dumping ground of like, well, this movie has to come out sometime, so I guess just like put it out then. But so I feel like horror movies get kind of dumped into that space too, because I think people don't know exactly how they're going to do, but they think, probably somebody will go see them. So I think that's probably why. I was just impressed by how many came out in May, which I think of as sort of the start of a kind of ramp up into the major season, like the summer season. Again, there were like so many films coming out in May that I couldn't keep up with them with classes ending and everything.
It does feel a little bit like there is this built-in audience where it's like they know the horror fans come out, like, and that's going to be there, and that's kind of why they can get their budget. The budgets are small, but it's also, as you both were saying, there's this guaranteed return. I think that also affects when they release things, because it's like, well, people don't go to the movies during Dumpuary because the movies aren't very good, but they will go to see a horror movie. So we'll put some out there. And then it feels like in May, they were like, oh, we can counter program some of these bigger releases that are out there, and it's turning out that like it's the programming now, like it's just because the horror movies are taking off, or at least this one has, that we're going to be talking about today, Obsession, and also the more recent Backrooms, both made a ton of money because people were like, I want to go to the movies, I know the horror movies usually give me a good time, I'll go see that, and maybe won't see little baby Yoda. Or at least won't go back to that a second or third time unless you're, real sickos like us.
70%. was the drop off for Mando and Grogu.
It's not great.
That's a different kind of horror movie. Well, and I'll just piggyback off of that point by saying, so I went to Backrooms this Thursday. We're recording on Tuesday, I think is what today is.
Yep.
So on this previous Thursday, the Thursday night preview night, that's when I went and saw Backrooms. And I will just say the theater I go to was alive in a way it almost never is. Like right up there with Barbenheimer and sometimes I accidentally go on opening night of one of those anime small releases and get really confused about what's going on and why there's so many scary costumes. But I was shocked that it was so many people. My screening at Backrooms was completely sold out. I think it was like the 10 o'clock Thursday night. And then I was walking out and everybody around me had just gotten out of Obsession or Backrooms, and they were all talking about Obsession and like so obsessed with it. Then Saturday, prime matinee time, I went and saw Mando and Grogu with a friend, and there were 6 of us in the theater that probably had 350 seats in it. It was bleak. And so I think this goes back to the point. Maybe the lesson coming out of May is that the counter programming needs to be the programming. And the blockbusters are going to lose that space. So, well, I want to not waste anybody's time. Sarah, to give us a couple highlights from your year in horror so far, throw out a title or two, and we'll bounce it around if anybody else has seen it.
I'm going to highlight 2 movies that I think are just incredible. I loved them. And I'm going to leave off Bone Temple because we've already discussed that, even just on the Oscar episode when I was here last. The 2 movies I want to really put a plug in for are Hokum, directed by Damian McCarthy. His last 2 movies were incredible, Caveat and Oddity. This one was also just great. I really loved it. I kind of knew enough about the premise going in that I was like, yeah, I probably get what this is. And I felt like it really took me on a journey. I was like, oh, I didn't know what this was at all. And I thought Adam Scott's performance was perfect, dry, just exactly what you want from an Adam Scott. So Hokum is incredible whenever it comes to streaming. I don't think it's probably in any theaters still, but I would say go see Hokum or rent it when it comes to VOD. The other one I don't think anybody has seen because last time I checked, its U.S. box office was $6,000. This is a New Zealand film called Marama, and it is gorgeous. It is this story about this is stuff you would find in the trailer, no spoilers. Story about this Maori woman who goes to England to kind of find out more about her family and her background. And the whole time, so there's like gorgeous Gothic Victorian, like lush costumes and backdrops. It's really, really incredible. The whole time, she's in danger and she knows she's in danger, but you don't quite know what's happening or why she's in danger or what exactly is up with these awful English people who are part of sort of colonization efforts in New Zealand. They're up to some bad stuff, but you don't know exactly what, and you're gonna find out. Incredible. See this movie. I'm thinking about including this on my syllabus for the fall. It's really great. I just loved it. So those are my top 2 of the year so far. I'll say I'm really, really looking forward to Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma. Jane Schoenbrun's upcoming film, I think, comes out in July or August. Their first film, I saw The TV Glow, was really phenomenal, so creative, so so subtle, so interesting. This film looks fully like a rose-colored orgy of weird ideas, and I'm absolutely here for it. There in the trailer, there was a trailer that came out in the last week or 2. The trailer seems to have a kind of visual reference to David Cronenberg's Videodrome, with someone putting a VHS tape into sort of a physical orifice. And so I'm curious to see like what they're getting up to with this movie. Also, I think given the cast, Gillian Anderson, Hannah Einbinder, and the trailer showed Fairuza Balk is in this movie from The Craft. I think the sapphic internet is going to completely implode with this movie when this movie comes out, because this is giving like iconic kind of queer femme energy, which I think is going to be really exciting to kind of see. See more of that kind of coming into the horror space. So I think that sounds really cool. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, there's so much to pick up on there. Go ahead, Jen.
Mine's quick, so I'll just interject that their Cannes appearances were phenomenal. Like they
cool.
they're all the interviews they gave and everything were great. I'd say in terms of fashion, they were only rivaled by Demi Moore, probably.
Ooh, I'll have to look at that.
Yeah.
Okay, so first, my Hokum story, which is a tragedy. I went and saw Hokum at, again, I think like a 10 o'clock show, which at AMC means it really starts at 10:30. And so what is Hokum? Probably an hour 45. And roughly an hour, 20 minutes in, the fire alarm went off and they evacuated us into the parking lot behind the mall. And then after a half hour out there, they came and told us they could not possibly restart the movies. It was a technological impossibility, they told me.
Oh, no.
So then they also said we could not pass through the building to get to our cars. So I had to go around the dark side of the mall to get back to my car to get home. So I missed the end of Hokum, is the tragedy. And
Greg, you were in a horror movie. That sounds horrifying.
that is my AMC location. And yes, so I was totally engrossed by it up until the point I saw, and we'll stay pretty spoilery, but I will say I'm not that susceptible to jump scares, and that one got me good a couple times, which I was surprised by, and completely agree that Adam Scott, is just incredible. And I love him dearly, but it does take me a minute to lose the Ben Wyatt Parks and Rec persona. And yet he did it. He did it here. And it never felt like he was goofing or, being too ironic. Like you said, it was a dry humor, but not an ironic humor. So that was really good. Jen, Hokum is very Irish, but in a delightful way.
Thanks, Greg. I was gonna say it'd be more the jump scares. That would be the problem for me, probably.
More the jump scares.
The jump scares.
But if the jump scares are that it's Irish, I mean, forget it. Jen can watch this.
Double whammy.
I have not seen Hokum. This is entirely my fault, because that was one of Jasmine's, like, she marked that as like, I want to see that, and then we just never got the plans together to like actually go and see it, and now it's not in the theaters. It is apparently on VOD, as Jen uncovered. I guess today it came out today. So it's the expensive VOD. It's $20 to rent, $25 to own. But you can you can grab it there, listeners, if you are if you want to listen to it, if you want to go check it out. I will be watching it at some point soon with Jasmine, and I want to plug two things. First, Sarah, you probably do know this, but just because you did refer to I Saw the TV Glow as Jane Schoenbrun's first movie, there is a movie before I Saw the TV Glow that Jane Schoenbrun did called We're All Going to the World's Fair, which is, in my mind, not as good as I Saw the TV Glow, and I don't think as good as Camp Miasma looks like, but is worth watching, and is a much more low budget, lo-fi, more like creepiness than it is, I think, like horror. So that is not to be Joe correction over here, to be like, actually, it's not their first movie.
Oh, good. Be that guy on this episode, movie. PT. Oh, good.
Yeah,
good.
It's actually it's great.
I haven't seen that one. I'll check it out.
Okay, but noting that for the folks listening who are nodding along to the I Saw the TV Glow recommendation and the excitement that they for the new one, that they might want to go back to that. And I will also just plug an earlier episode that Greg and I did a month and a half ago, where we did short takes on sort of our, sort of the other movies of 2026 that we hadn't got around to covering because we'd been in a prolonged Oscar race because the Oscars were a little bit later this year. And in that episode, we do spend time talking about a couple of horror movies that, Sarah, I know you liked, but didn't include on your list, probably because we've already talked about them. And that is 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, and also Send Help, the Sam Raimi movie, which is excellent. Excellent sort of horror comedy film there. So more to discuss in that episode if you would like to go back and check that out. And I said two things, but I'm going to add in a third thing. Is anyone, if anyone else isn't watching it and is interested in that sort of horror, but also in the comedy zone, Widow's Bay on Apple TV has been a really good time. Again, probably a little more comedy than horror, but I think I'm looking at Jen as someone who is less into the scary movies. You'll probably be like, this is quite scary, actually, because there are scary moments there. But really good balance. It's a TV show. It's not a movie. We're a movie podcast. I know, but it's been executing things really well. It's I don't know if this week's episode is out yet. I don't think it comes out until
Wednesday.
Tonight or tomorrow. Yeah, but yeah, 7 episodes so far. It's been a great time.
It's my favorite thing that's happened this year so far, Widow's Bay. And speaking of Parks and Rec, it was created by Parks and Rec writer Katie Dippold. So it's got that sort of like, workplace comedy, but like this is they're doing some real legit horror stuff on this show. It's incredible. The one of the last episodes, they went back to the kind of colonial origins of this little island community. That was a banger. Not a ton of comedy in that one. That was pretty sinister.
It's good.
So I will now mansplain some things to the women on the line. PT, you can take 5. So I just want to throw in also really absolutely loved the movies Sarah plugged. I'm just going to throw one in that stood out to me, which was Mother Mary, which seems to have come and gone pretty quickly. And I don't know that it reads as horror movie from the materials available out there. And I wouldn't put it in the like strict horror sense. I would put it more in the like ghost story type of genre. But it's a Anne Hathaway film and David Lowery, I think, directed it. And it was really excellent. And it's funny because not only are there 2 Anne Hathaway movies that came out in May, but they are both about fashion. And then you throw in Boots Riley's I Love Boosters, and it's like fashion took over a chunk of my movie going in May. But this one really stood out for being actually the best at fashion. Like really talking about sorry, I'm the editor of a fashion magazine. So like, I really appreciate when there's good fashion on display. So it was really unexpected and really wonderful. And that would be my plug for one I think most people missed. And it is already on VOD. It got to VOD very quickly. So I don't think a lot of people saw that one either. And finally, if you are a giant Jane Schoenbrunn fan, don't forget that they are also releasing their first novel this year, which feels like a paid plug from my wife's company. But I will say we've had copies of it here in the house, and I have read a chunk of it, and it is a very excellent, good time. So people should check that out. I, of course, reserved the ticket to go see Camp Miasma at an overnight camp double feature with Sleepaway Camp, which I'm very, very excited about as a kind of, it's being billed as an immersive experience. So I'm very excited to see if I live or if I die. But we'll see in the long run. And their social media, meaning the film's social media account, I followed when I got this ticket. And whoever's managing that is right on top of, like you're saying, the sapphic dream energy coming out. They keep finding all these tweets or whatever you call a tweet now, like celebrating how this is like their new sexuality because of just the trailer and so on. So it's made me laugh many times scrolling through social media.
Greg, have you seen Sleepaway Camp before?
I haven't, actually.
Okay, so you're in for it. It's a wild ride. I'm going to see a double feature of that in a week. A friend of mine runs a VHS club here where they just screen, her personal collection of VHS tapes, and she's doing a double feature of But I'm a Cheerleader and Sleepaway Camp in a couple of weeks. So I'm very excited for that double feature. It's a good one.
The only other thing I had in the outline was there's also been a lot of horror junk out this year. Can we kill the Scream franchise? Why are we still doing this? Did you see that one, Sarah?
No, I didn't. I was so caught up in the like, everyone online was like, well, we're boycotting this movie for 8 different reasons. And I was like, I don't have time for this right now. I'll see this at some point, but I can't get involved. I know that there was controversy over, they apparently used some AI tech to do some of the digital rendering of like faces or something. That seems bad, so I don't need to support that. But yeah,
Yes.
the Scream franchise, I love Scream. I actually liked the last 2, the 5 and 6 installments. I thought they were okay. But yeah, we can be done with it.
And they really abandoned those reboot characters for the most part, partially some of the controversy around those. And then I also, I just want to shout out, because we are doing what we're doing currently. There was a podcasting horror movie.
That.
Did you see that? What did you make of Undertone? I believe is the name of it.
Undertone, Overtone, Undertone.
Some kind of tone.
I thought it had a really good central. Did anybody else see it? A really good central idea to it, and a great soundscape. And I think sound is something we'll probably talk about with our film today, but the soundscape was very important to that. Here's the thing I thought was interesting. The very, I guess, successful podcasters at the center of this story podcasted in what I can only describe as 10-minute increments across a week. Now, I don't know if that's how you guys have ever done this, but it doesn't seem like a very good way to run a podcast. They would podcast for like 10 minutes and they'd be like, okay, well, we'll pick this up on Tuesday. And I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So that just served the narrative value of what they were doing. But I mean, I kept thinking, what an insane thing for them to be like doing in this film. I thought it was really interesting. The end goes too bananas, I will say. I think the end undermines a little bit of what happens before it. But I thought it was very creative. And again, the soundscape was very good. A good one to see in the theater. But I've heard people say also watching it at home with headphones, you get a really cool sense of the dynamic soundscape of that. So yeah, I thought that was cool. Not great, but I think a reasonable addition to this year's horror slate.
Yeah, and we have not done an episode of Long Take 10 minutes at a time. However, I believe,
to be clear, we've never recorded for 10 minutes. Like, that's just not ever happened.
I don't even know if our tests for sound are under 10 minutes.
It's a 2-hour min.
I will say the part that rang true is, I believe in the universe of that show, of that movie, the female host is on the East Coast and the male host is in England.
Yeah.
And so they record before he goes to work. So she's up at like 3 and he's up at like 6, and they record and then he goes out. And so there were some shots of a lonely podcaster in the middle of the night just talking into their laptop that felt very familiar in many ways.
Very resonant for your experience.
Amazing. I don't have that much to contribute to this because it's well known that I've historically avoided horror until we started doing the show. But the scuttlebutt in the podcasting scape is that people are actually very excited for the next scary movie because of the Wayans brothers are taking it back.
I've heard that. Yeah, but people seem excited about it. I don't have a lot of I've seen the original Scary Movie, but that's probably about the last time I checked in with that. But yeah, I agree. People seem really excited about this.
Makes me nervous that the trailer hinges on a "isn't it stupid when people care about their pronouns" joke. It's not giving me the best vibe. So.
I haven't seen that. So
that's a tough one.
That doesn't sound good.
No.
But like it's, I mean, with everything we're talking about, it seems like ripe for Scary Movie to come back and parody all this, and Terrifier and Megan and all these kind of ridiculous franchises that have come back.
Yeah, and one thing the last 2 Screams did before this most recent one was they kind of dug into this idea of all of this prestige horror that we're seeing, and like kind of interrogating that a little bit, like is that as good as like the kind of campier, sillier, gorier, stupider horror. So I imagine the Scary Movie franchise, if it continues beyond this one, if they don't in this one kind of get into that, I'm sure they will, because that prestige horror is really, I think, where a lot of the juice is right now.
All right, I think I have to snap the willow bark and make Jen control the show again. So I've taken up enough. But that was awesome, Sarah. Thanks for doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I just
Yeah,
like talking to
thanks.
somebody about horror. These two pretend,
Me too.
but they don't.
I
They
don't
don't
pretend.
They don't get it.
PT might pretend. I don't pretend.
I'm pretending, Jason.
Yeah.
I'm a little poser.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Be careful what you wish for. I guess that's all I'll say to that. But yeah, let's get into talking about Obsession. I saw this movie yesterday, and ever since I've been thinking about it and like really eager to talk about it. So we'll start with the short take. What did everybody think about Obsession? Sarah, we'll start with you.
I thought this was a really exciting, technically interesting movie with a lot of subtlety to it in ways that, you know, sometimes horror can be a little ham-fisted. And I thought there were moments of this that really were so well calibrated, right? There are really subtle, quiet moments. There are big, explosive moments, some of which kind of veer towards, veer into comedy a little bit in ways that I think we'll touch on today. But I thought this was pretty sophisticated, especially for someone who, I gathered this is PT, stand by. I gather this is only his second feature film, and the first feature film was like 62 minutes long. So this is, I think, a pretty interesting film with lots of threads that we can pull on today. I enjoyed it. I watched it twice. There is one jump scare in this that got me both times, even though the second time I knew it was coming. And I was like, wait, is it now? And then it was like a second later than I thought it was going to be. And then there's another great jump scare that I think probably got people in my theater both times that I saw it, but because of the framing of the shot, you can tell something's coming. So that one didn't get me, but there's one incredible jump scare in this. I think this is a great film. I can see why so many people are sort of gravitating towards this. I think there's a lot going on in this, and I think it's fun. Moments are funny, moments are very, very tense, moments are very, very like jump scary. So I had a great time at the movies both times.
Well, I only saw it one time, and it was later than Jen. I saw it late last night. I had the Greg honorary post 10 o'clock. It was 10:45 screening time, so 11:15 start time. Still a pretty decently populated theater for that late on a Monday night. And yeah, I mean, I had a great time with this. I will say, to sort of speak to the being a poser about horror movies, unlike Greg going to see everything, unlike Sarah, who is committed to the genre, I really like having seen a horror movie. I don't like the process of watching it for the first time, because I'm mostly sitting there being like, here we go. All right, they're going to do something to me now. And it's like, it is just sort of buzzing in my head that I'm just sort of like, they're going to make me uncomfortable. They're going to do something. There's going to be a jump. There's going to be some sort of like period of dread. And like, I'm resenting the fact that I've let myself be put in this position to feel this way. And then stuff starts happening and I'm like, this is great. Like, I love this. So that's just a general horror movie thing that happens. We can discuss more maybe as we get into it, like sort of the gore side of horror versus the sort of creepy dread tension part of it. And I think I react more to the latter than the former, where I'm like, gore, yeah, okay, I get it. It's violence, that's fun. But I'm not like worried about it, whereas I'm worried about like, okay, like what's gonna jump out of somewhere. Anyway, I think this movie did a really good job of balancing all of that and executed really well. You know, it is at its core a Twilight Zone episode, and a lot of times you can go see a movie that's, this is an hour 40-ish minutes, and you can feel like, yeah, this could have been a 25-minute Twilight Zone episode, and it didn't need to be stretched out this long. But I think this movie does a really good job of exploring what happens and exploring the implications and kind of diving deeper into the characters and letting the performances really carry forward, where it never felt too long. And it also never felt like it was adding unnecessary elements to add complications to just be an excuse to extend the story. So yeah, I think it's hard to discuss more details without going until we get to spoiler territory. But I think it was executed really well, and I think it was quite successful at what it was aiming to do. I did feel a little bit like, oh, I came too late to this, like because I'd heard so many good things. I was like, was it that good? But it has, like Jen was saying, it like I drove home. I went to bed. I woke up today. I had other things to do, and it's been like just hanging out in the back of my mind. So I'm like, well, maybe there's a lot here. I'm looking forward to unpacking it and hearing what everyone thought.
I thought this movie featured a single performance that was incredibly difficult, and Andy Richter nailed it. Just playing the dad of the one girl. No, actually, that may be my only complaint. I love you, Andy Richter, but you are just Conan's sidekick when you show up.
Do we even know why he's in this movie? Like
he's
how
a working
he ended
actor.
up?
I mean, do you not watch Elf every year and get reminded that he's a working actor? But yes, I mean, I think it does have to deal with Conan's kind of media empire changing strides, and he doesn't get to be on air every night. No, the stand-up performance, I wish listeners could see you all nodding with me, and then when I got to Andy Richter being like, no, what did he do? But it is Indy Navarrete, I believe. And I was not familiar with this actress at all. And the way she delivers a performance across like 5 octaves is just incredible. And I think I did not have the PT problem because I'm a real one, and I went to the preview screening before release day of this because I didn't want it spoiled. I wanted to be riding the wave just right. And so I had never seen that actress before. The movie kind of started, and I was like, are you kidding me? We're doing the manic pixie dream girl thing again? Like, we're still here doing this? And then the way the movie plays with that and these like totally bonkers, I don't think I've seen a movie this year that has such a sure hand that knows exactly what they want and it delivers on that. And I think it's worth considering whether, you like that or not. But, I always respect a creator who is able to deliver on their vision in that kind of way. And it's really quite impressive, especially because this is a youngster, right? I don't know. I feel like I've just hit that age where suddenly a lot of really impressive people are a lot younger than me. I'm like, what am I even doing, man? Like, I shouldn't be working in my friend's dad's music shop anymore. I should get out there and live a life. So full ringing endorsement for me. I've only seen it one time, but absolutely told. Actually, I mean, Sarah was lobbying for a horror episode, and I told PT and Jen, I'm like, it's got to be Obsession because Obsession is well worth discussing. So you're welcome, audience. I created this. Jen, as somebody who does not like horror, generally speaking, what did you think?
So, yes, I have said many times on the show that I'm just very weak to anything scary, and I don't usually enjoy being scared. But what I've kind of learned over the past couple of years, and I'd say this movie is included in that, is that I'm willing to put up with a lot if a horror movie has a lot of interesting ideas and is clearly like trying to wrestle with a lot of stuff in addition to just scaring me and making me stressed out for the entire runtime, which I was. I spent a lot of time in my seat, like with my face like in my t-shirt. I don't know how that was supposed to help me, but that is what I did. And and I would actually say, like, maybe this is jumping ahead to the recommendation algorithm a little bit, but I would say for fellow people who are not that into horror, I would sort of say that the horror in this was pretty manageable, and it does do the sort of weapons thing of waits a long time before it really dials up into like full blown, just like crazy banana things are happening and it's really bloody and stuff. And so to me, it was like high concept enough and sort of like had enough ideas and was really willing to take the time to build up the story in terms of like helping us get to know these characters and watching them interact with each other, and the kind of the slow burn of like, so then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, what's happened? Oh, there are things that are going to happen. Oh no. Like, and so I had a great time. I really enjoyed it, and it gave me a lot to think about, which is great. And the scariest thing about this movie is actually people misinterpreting what it's about, which again, that's to tease our later sections. But I've definitely seen some takes of this movie where I'm like, oh, oh no, that's not what we want. So yeah, I would recommend it as well. I think it's worth the hype. It's worth getting in on it while it's like part of the model culture too. Because I think shout out to my friend Shirley, who loves horror movies and went with me to go see this, and she sort of was filling me in on sort of how the internet was kind of buzzing about this movie, and so I think it's fun to be in on it. So I would say that I think this movie is
Jen, stop.
No, Greg, you stop. You only speak when I tell you to speak. Or I could just yell, no. Or
so we were having a nice date.
Yeah. Is that what she says in the restaurant?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were having such a nice time.
She says, hang on, I've got too many pieces of paper. She says no 11 or 12 times. And then she says, don't do that. I thought we were having a nice date. That was one of my options.
I thought we were having a nice podcast.
Use whatever you can, or just say instead, Greg had to step away. It's fine.
Okay.
Stop doing weird stuff, Greg.
Yeah, stop with the weird stuff.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Bye, Greg.
See you, Sarah.
Bye, Greg. Nice to see you.
All right. See ya.
Yeah. Good. Sorry, listeners. Greg had to leave. We didn't actually banish him into another realm. All right. So now we're on to recommendation algorithm, in which we establish the audience of a film. So I think I kind of jump-started this already by talking about, like, it's actually not that it's very tense and very stressful, but it's actually like, if you can handle weapons and the substance, I think this is fine. Like, you're clear to take off. But what other sort of like caveats or conditions would you kind of apply to recommending this movie? Are there any?
I think you have to have a slightly strong stomach. There are a couple moments of gore here. And I think if you are really a person who can't do any gore, there might be some times where you have to avert your eyes. But I think I think weapons is a great comp here, because there are even some similar themes and I think some similar gory moments for sure in that. Weapons, a couple other movies that I would say might sort of be in the same ballpark in some ways are the movie from a year or two ago called Companion, which is essentially about a kind of, android who is a companion to a man, and she sort of gains, consciousness in a different way. And then I think one thing we might talk about a little bit today is to what extent this is a movie with some comedic impulses. And so I think if you like things like, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead movies, or things like that with a little sort of, horror movies, but with kind of a little bit of a smirk to them. I think those would be good kind of analogs here. If you are a person who likes those, you might also like this.
I thought I had I'm like, okay, The Evil Dead and Companion. These are going to be great comps. No one else will bring them up. But those were ones I had thought of. I already blew what was my backup, which was just sort of saying, if you like Twilight Zone episodes, like, this is a good one. This is a sort of extended version of something like that. It's a very kind of classic, or even if you just sort of think about like The Curse of a Monkey's Paw kind of thing, about like, you think you want one thing, but then, what happens when it actually occurs? What are the consequences of that? I would also say for, like, who should check this out is like, if you are just like, I'm not going to say we're old, but if you're, over the age of 30 and you're like, what's happening with the kids today? I do think like a key part of the movie that we'll be digging into is interpersonal dynamics that are specifically discussing not just being in your 20s, but being in your 20s right now. So if you're sort of like, what, like, how are people living their lives in the current conditions? This movie is kind of talking about that. So even if you were like, oh, I don't really want to see gore, oh, I don't really want to be like unnerved, you will see gore. There are some very unnerving moments in this movie, and what I think are delightful ways. But again, when I was watching it, I was like, I can't believe you're doing this to me, movie, and I can't believe I've done this to myself. And then the scene would end, and I'd be like, that was great. I had a great time. So it doesn't make sense, but that's how I feel. So I will say that the one, if that sounds good, great. If like feeling really unnerved or seeing some like flashes, some instances of gore is something where you're like, that's a no-go zone for me. This would be a problem for you. I will also note, and I will make the judgment that it's not a spoiler because it's within the first 5 minutes of the movie. If you don't like dead pets, there's a dead pet from the start of the movie, and that is a plot point that continues forward. But someone comes home and finds their beloved pet dead of accidental but non-malicious causes, and that's not part of the horror necessarily in terms of like the cat didn't die because of whatever is happening in the rest of the movie. But if you are like, oh no, like, and that makes you too sad to enjoy the rest of the movie, then this could be a problem because again, that's not something that's like happens and then is forgotten. It does keep kind of being brought up again in various ways. So I don't know, Jen, again, I feel like almost your instinct is maybe the most interesting here for as the non-horror person. Who do you think you'd recommend this to?
I would recommend this to people who like a little bit of social commentary in their horror, because I do think that was my favorite part about it. And then I would also say people who like it when horror movies are creepy, because I think there was a lot in this movie that was just generally creepy and unsettling and unnerving, and there were definitely moments of overt like we're here to scare you kind of stuff too. But I would say that like the default mode of the movie is more of kind of like, oh, that's really, I don't like that. That's really so like, why is she have that look on her face? Why is she standing that way? Like, it's really creepy. Which I actually prefer. I prefer things that are creepy and atmospheric to things that are just overtly trying to say boo and scare me. So that might be why I liked it a little bit better. I would also say too that it reminded me so much of The Substance because it has the kind of this through line in the plot of like, you signed up for a thing because you thought you wanted it or you thought you needed it, and find out. It's the find out. Most of this movie is the find out period. Right. So I think in that sense, if you like that sort of story, because we'll talk about this in spoiler mode, but there's an interesting mix of not just sort of horror and comedy like we're talking about, because I did laugh a lot during this movie, and it kind of was surprised because like my theater was not full just because I went during the day. It had a handful of people in it though, so it wasn't empty. But I felt like I could only hear myself laughing during this, and I was like, I don't know if there's something wrong with me, or if just everyone's just really quiet. Yeah. So I would say that it's kind of like there's enough in here that's cerebral, but at the same time, it does check all of those horror boxes in terms of like like I don't know, I don't like that. Yeah.
Not to continue the theme of mansplaining and being Joe correction, but I'm curious about Sarah's opinion of one thing that you said. Sarah, how many horror movies do you feel don't have social commentary?
I mean, that's a great question. I feel like, especially our like contemporary experience of horror movies, that is a little bit of a somewhat baked in, because even just in small ways, they might have commentary on certain things. But I mean, I think a lot of horror movies are not executing well on that intention of offering social commentary. So I think this one is, with the caveat that Jen mentioned early about the possible, I wrote it in my notes as the Scorsese problem of like interpretation issues. But I think this one's executing pretty well on a pretty interesting social problem. But it's a good question, PT, and I'm curious are there, as you're sort of in your position as a like maybe more casual or less freakish consumer of horror than me, do you feel like you seek horror movies that kind of don't have any real social commentary, or you feel the same, like it's kind of a little bit in everything?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I asked it with the idea of being like, Jen, maybe you'd like more horror movies, because it actually is in a lot of them. Like, it's there like pretty frequently. But I think the way you answered it clarified that wouldn't be a great recommendation, because a lot of them don't do it very well. Where it's, or it's sort of like, it's kind of the dollop of the premise on top of it. And then it's like, anyway, all this stuff's going to unfold, but like, we're going to sort of have this like shingle over it of like, but really it's about, you know, this thing in society, but like it's really just about like seeing arms cut off or whatever like stuff's happening.
To me, there's kind of two levels at which it could be operating, right? Because the social commentary could be from like I guess not self-conscious of the film, but it's just coming, it's like the premise of the what is horrific in the movie is providing the social commentary. I remember when we talked about Jaws, like no one is like coming down definitively to be like, this is what Jaws is saying to us, but there's enough in there that we can sort of extrapolate the themes and the social commentary. Whereas I feel like this movie, the screenplay itself has so many lines in it that I'm like, oh yeah, it's definitely trying to circle around a particular idea. And I thought the execution of it was very smart from like a level, from the writing of it, and not just the like, what are we seeing on screen? What is the thing that's scaring us?
It's really using a specific social dynamic as a lens through which to tell this specific story, rather than perhaps just kind of incorporating certain elements of social commentary into a story that's maybe operating outside of that framework.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. I mean, I think we got to go into spoiler mode.
I think so too. PT, on the same token where you gave a sort of content warning about the animal violence here, I think maybe there are two other relevant content warnings we should provide on this side in case people just want that in mind. So if you don't want any spoilers at all, I guess turn it off now. But I think we have to give a content warning for sexual assault, because that becomes really increasingly evident throughout the course of the film, and probably a content warning for self-harm and suicide. Just so if those are issues for you as a person, proceed with caution here, because this movie's going to engage with those.
So will we, really after the spoiler.
So will we.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So if you have not seen Obsession, this is your exit stage right, and go see the movie, because we've all been recommending it, and come back and join us for the rest of the conversation. So I want to go start with the ending, because I feel like that's often what we do here. We go straight to the most spoilery thing. And Bear dies at the end of this movie, takes a bunch of pills. I would love to debate how noble a self-sacrifice that is, because I've seen lots of different 0%. Takes on the internet.
Nothing Bear does is noble. I think is an important,
because he tries to throw them up immediately.
Right.
Okay.
He only
He's it's only because till the end.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, this is why you're my friends.
I hate. I need to show you right before we even get started. I have a full page of notes. This is the legal case against Baron, whatever his name is. Yes. I have like Baron 20 points here about how this is not a good guy, even from moment one of the movie.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so I want to get into all that, but yeah, my point was that I've seen some takes out there that are like him taking the pills was his way of like trying to be better and to try to set Nikki free. And I was like, first of all, like you said, he immediately chickens out and is like, I regret everything. I'm going to save myself. And he just is too late. Right. Which is what's so delicious about that ending, is that like his agency is finally taken away from him. But with the other willow breaking, but it also, like, at no point in the movie did I think there were many other previous opportunities for him to care about Nikki and save her from this fate, right?
Yes.
So I'm not convinced that.
No.
If
Nor should
anything,
you do.
if anything, I read him doing that, even though he fails. Like his choice to take those pills, to me, was he was like, I can't take this torture anymore of of the situation I put myself in. I need an out. That is how I interpret it.
I thought it was a little bit worse. It was a little bit more selfish, which was like, I can't explain this.
Yes.
And continue to try to build a happy life with this version that I've created. Like there's too much that's happened. Like it's going to come down on us. So I won't be able to enjoy this like manipulated situation anyway, like I might as well just kill myself.
Right. So it's him, like,
I agree.
Him not accepting accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is the theme of the whole movie, basically. But Sarah, let's hear more about. I want to hear the legal brief against.
Oh my God,
the character.
Truly, this whole page is full. We start this movie the very first moment we see him. Right, he and his friend Ian, who is Barker's, longtime collaborator, Cooper Tomlinson, I think. We see him kind of practicing what he wants to say to Nikki with this waitress who they've kind of enlisted into helping him figure out. The first thing he does after he kind of pours his heart out to this waitress is ignore what this woman says to him, right? They've asked her for advice. He says, nah, I'm going to listen to my dumb friend over here who says, don't do that. Go and neg her and criticize her and call her freaky Nikki, right? So immediately he is not interested in what this first woman says. We then go to him accidentally killing his cat. That's negligence. I'm really sorry, but like it's a terrible accident, and something like that could happen. But Jen, we have cats. Peachy, do you have a cat?
I do.
Yes, he does.
My cat's never opened a pill bottle. Has yours? I don't think they could do it, right? So that means that guy left pills around for a cat to get into, and his setup for the cat was atrocious. He had cat food all over the place. So this guy's a negligent cat owner. That's the second thing we learn about him. From there, it just gets worse and worse. He is so closed off. He can't take jokes. He can't be vulnerable. He can't express himself to this person who is meant to be his very close friend, right? We get the impression that he and Nikki have been friends since grade school, high school, a little bit unclear on that. But, Ian jokes at the start about this declaration being a kind of 7 years late promposal, right? So that means these people are 24, 25 years old, and this person can't express himself or be at all vulnerable with this person he is meant to be really close friends with. He can't even tell Nikki that his cat died. He tells Sarah as soon as she walks up to the bar because he's prepared to unload on her, right?
Yeah, but he also very conveniently doesn't mention anything about the circumstances of the cat's death, right?
Exactly.
He's not willing to accept. My cat just died. Like it was a thing that he didn't contribute to at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he exhibits all of these sort of bad, cowardly, closed off signs, I think, from just the minute one of this movie. And my legal case goes on from there. I've got all the receipts. This is not a good man. Up to and including, of course, the line that Greg started us out with about, what would be so bad about being with me, which is just such a bone-chilling moment of selfish entitlement. I mean, the premise of this movie is essentially that this man makes his best friend into a sexual slave for him. And then that becomes really inconvenient and he has to figure out a way out of it, right? And that's just the kind of person you have to be okay with any part of this is so profoundly bad.
Yeah.
I imagine we're going to talk about sort of incel and manosphere culture at some point, which is where my mind immediately goes. But this is the kind of guy who, even though he purportedly loves this person and has this close friendship, quote unquote, with her, he is so prepared to essentially imprison her in whatever this liminal space is that the actual Nikki is in, to take advantage of and to sort of take ownership over her body and this sort of, weird version of herself that is not herself, right? He's not a good guy. He's a really bad guy.
So agreed. The two pieces of evidence that I'll enter
May
to
it
add
please
to
the
this
court.
list is yes. Well, so I've heard a lot of takes where people are like, oh, well, like at the beginning of the movie, how could he possibly have known that the willow breaking the willow would actually work, right? So like it's not a crime to have a crush and to have wishes and desires and feelings, but I feel like the movie very specifically is setting it up so to interrogate that very desire, right? The fact that the desire that he has is not for a meaningful relationship with Nikki. It is for this kind of like fantasy that he has about her and being with her that completely removes her and her sense of individuality and agency from the equation. Like, and I think the shot that's the most important at the beginning is right before she calls him. He's on social media, sort of like staring at photos of her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, to me, that really signaled that the movie was trying to show us he doesn't actually want to be in a real human relationship with this person. He wants to like possess her in a way, like, and it's like he's more interested in the like infatuation with her than in like her as a person.
Yeah, and like right before he makes this wish, because point taken, right? If you make a wish on an object, like no reasonable human person would be like, well, that's going to work, right? So yeah, point taken. Like he doesn't necessarily know that that's going to do the trick. But right before he makes that wish, there are two things that happen that signal to him that she doesn't feel that way. And I think a lot of people would be savvy enough to pick up on those things. The first is that, this is all part of my legal case. The first is that Nikki says, hey, like Sarah was talking about you all day at work today. How do you feel about Sarah? Do you like Sarah? We've all been in this position where we're like trying to get our friends together and trying to suss it out and feel out the situation on behalf of another person, right? So Nikki's clearly doing that and saying like, hey, do you like Sarah? She likes you, dummy. And he doesn't pick up on that in a full enough way, or he sort of dismisses it because, he's fixated just on this idea of being with Nikki, right? The second thing that happens is the line I started with, in which she says, hey, do you like me? Because if you like me, now would be the time you have to say something and be vulnerable and tell me that, right? So that we can have the conversation for the sake of our friendship, right? And this is a friendship they've both admitted means a lot to them, even though he doesn't actually seem to know, key details about her life. But that would have been the moment for him to say, yes, actually, I do like you. But he is too scared because he knows on some level that the answer is going to be no, I don't like you back in that way, right? So I agree. He really does not want a real meaningful relationship. And so when he's making that wish, he is wishing for the idea of her, or for this sort of, alternate version of her that he ends up getting, but not her, not the actual real her, because he's not talking to the real her about his real feelings. He can't do that.
Yeah.
Everything you're both saying is absolutely correct. It was funny after the fact to find out that there were people who existed online who were like, who's the actual villain? And it's just like, yeah, like, no, of course. Like that's just you're just describing what happens in the movie. Okay. But like a couple of things I want to say to sort of like, I don't know if I'm adding to the case or I'm just writing what is it, like a cert, a little extra, like if the court would
addendum,
mind, a little addendum to it all. Dude's got no game. He has absolutely no game, and that's fine. In my mid-20s, I also had no game, and so I get it. But it's like, the window's there, the door is open. There's this sort of like you have nothing but time, is what his friend says. Side note, we can get into whether his friend is intentionally sabotaging him because he's got his own motives. But, it's like, wait for the right time. When the time comes, it'll present itself. It clearly presents itself in that car ride. The time is now. And, like, it's a movie. And of course, we see the most important parts of people's lives in the scenes of a movie. But it's like, you have to know that, dude. It's right there. Indy Navarrete, the actress who plays Nikki, said she played that scene like she was into him, like she was flirting with him. And that was like, whether that is what Nikki actually thought, or if it was just the like, that's what the scene needs. You know, she does the like, if I have a crush on someone, they'll never know, like, because like it's such a secret. There's enough like there's so many
there's enough of an opening. Yes.
there's so many on-ramps to the conversation that he just blows right past and is just like nope, and all of that speaks to his weakness. And I will say, like, I understand to some degree through that scene, maybe through the scene when they're at work the next day and they're like, oh, she has done Molly and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's a Molly thing, where there's like, okay, there's some sort of external explanation perhaps for what's going on. Maybe, I mean, once they're in the bedroom and she's being so weird, like, I think you can't not be like, what is happening? This is off. But I do understand that, like, that feeling of being kind of a loser guy, no game, no, like, you're not really making anything happen out there, who like fixates on one person and creates this like fake future of like what it will be like when we can actually like make something happen. And like, I actually, like they will realize I'm the right person, all those like nice guys who think that they have been friend zoned, when it's just sort of like, no, you're not, they didn't friend zone you. You put yourself in the friend zone because you thought if you acted like their friend, they would eventually come around to settling for you. And like, that's not how this works. That's just not the way that human relationships unfold. Generally, all due respect, maybe there's exceptions out there, but like, yeah, that's not really how it works. And that can't be it. And so I do understand that, like, not like feeling like you can put it out there, but for the listeners, for the viewers of the movie, I don't know how many listeners we would have with this be overlap, who feel like, but he's the sympathetic character for the duration of the movie because he, accidentally trapped himself in this scenario. Everything that Sarah is saying, Jen, you as well, but Sarah has the piece of paper. Everything that Sarah is saying is like very accurate, that it's like, though this is a inherent core flaw that isn't having no game, that isn't like over projecting, like sort of putting this like potential relationship onto a person who like has no idea that's happening, and like you sort of building up a dynamic, a potential future, a whatever with this other person. It is a dismissal of female agency. It is a like desire to own and control, and to sort of like, I feel like, and again, like, there's some degree where I can look back and be like, yeah, I had a crush on that girl for like months, and like, what was I doing? Like, nothing actually ever happened there, and they never even knew that occurred when I was in like my late teens, early 20s, and it was always like, did I really want to start a relationship with that person, or did I want to be in a relationship and be able to say, look, I'm in a relationship with this person. Here's this like totem of achievement that I have. And it's very clear that's where he is in this movie, and that's the way he acts. And again, the reason he's the villain and the reason he's evil is that once he gets to a position where he gets that through clearly messed up ways, where it's going very badly, he in the same way he never gets on the actual conversation. He never goes the on-ramps to actually talk about his feelings. He never gets off the highway of letting this person be controlled by him and this mysterious force, this willow-based force that is controlling her. Even when he calls the number to be like, I need to talk to you about this, they're like, oh, you want to cancel it? And he's like, no, I just want to augment it. Like, I don't want to cancel it. And it's like, bro, like, that's it. Like, that's, hopefully people have already realized it, but like, I would hope by that point in the movie, people are realizing he's the bad guy because he's too, he just wants to control more than he wants to.
Yeah. He's way too okay with what's happening.
Absolutely.
That was actually going to be my second piece of evidence that I wanted to enter, was the phone call when he calls the number on the back of the box. And he's like, no, I don't want to cancel. I just want to alter the wish a little.
We don't really do that.
Yeah, that's so good.
And that I assume you saw, but that is the director. That's the writer-director.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's really funny.
doing this
I
thing.
love that. That makes it even better.
Which is a great scene because we were talking pre spoiler warning about the sort of mix of comedy and that where it's like that's very funny where he's just like, oh, so did you just want to cancel it? And he's like, yeah, and then I guess I'll go ahead and cancel it. Oh, we don't really do that either.
Yeah.
And like that was very funny. But then when it pivots into just sort of like, oh, do you want to talk to her? Like, do you want Nikki?
Right, and
Like,
the
and
screaming
in the background, like. That was one of the more horrifying moments of the movie.
Yeah.
There's a
From
couple
that
visual
moment
moments.
forward, he knows.
Yes.
Whether
All the
he
excuses
wants
that you
to.
can make for him are totally gone at that point.
God.
But yeah, so it's like he didn't want to take back the fact that she wasn't consenting to their relationship. He just wanted it to be a slightly more pleasant for him, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
that was the way I read his request of like, no, I don't want to undo what I've done. I like that I'm like in this situation. I just want it to be a little less crazy and violent.
So fine tune that a little bit.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
is really disturbing.
I think if we look at this film from the perspective of the people who are not him, right, who have not made a wish, right, they are all so concerned because as Ian, and Ian does have his own sort of motives here, right, which are important to factor in, but everyone else in their circle is like, hey, man, it seems like our very good friend is in mental crisis
Mhm.
and you are taking advantage of that. And that is truly what is happening here. Like, magic aside, right? This person is not in a position to consent. They're not in a position to be in this kind of relationship. And he is doing that anyway. And so all of his friends are concerned for sort of the right reason, even though they don't have the full facts of the case in front of them, right? And they all make that really clear to him in ways that should be pinging these alarm bells like, right. This isn't actually okay, regardless of why it's happening, right? Regardless of whether I made a wish or whatever. This is not okay. He knows that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, separate from Ian's motives, whatever they may be, when he is like, it seems like you're taking advantage of her. I would like to think any decent person who had somehow found themselves in this scenario would be like, oh, I am. Like, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. But no, that's not him. It was interesting to then see when he talks to Sarah in a different car that Sarah's like, it looks like she's taking advantage of you, which is probably like her perspective. But is also an interesting, like I wonder if they weren't interrupted, thanks to the carefully framed shots of having us always looking out the car window, just waiting for something to happen. That like, if that would have been the way that he ends up extricating himself from committing to this situation, if he saw himself as the victim instead of the perpetrator, he could be like, she is taking advantage of me.
Mm-hmm.
That's bad. And even though it's all his fault.
Right. Yeah, and I'll say as a woman who's frequently not had game throughout parts of her life, what she is doing there as someone with a crush, an unrequited crush, is she's trying to sort of stroke his ego a little bit and say like, like even though maybe you've always wanted to be with Nikki, she's sort of taking advantage of you by leaning on you this way at this time with whatever's going on with her. And that's an angle too. It's just that, he's at that point it becomes moot because of course Nikki comes and interrupts them as we always knew she was going to from the shot framing.
Yeah.
If you can see a window, guess what? Something's coming up in that window.
I couldn't believe Nikki didn't come out of the house during the customer service phone call.
Oh yeah, I thought that was gonna happen.
I was just like, because the house was there the whole time when he's on the phone.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, I thought that too.
So I'm going to shift gears for us a little bit, and ask you if you've heard about the cat theory behind this. PT, have you heard about this? Like, I guess I should fully explain it for listeners anyway. But okay.
I'll just say no, only because I had a truncated amount of time. I saw it most recently, so I got to read a bunch of stuff in a short amount of time, but I didn't get to go too deep into it.
Right.
But please explain what the cat theory is.
Okay, so there's this prevailing theory on the internet that when Bear breaks the willow branch, that it's not just that Nikki is being trapped in like somewhere else or in her own body or whatever, but that her body is being possessed by the spirit of Sandy, who is the dead cat. And that that sort of explains a lot of the behavior that Nikki exhibits for the rest of the film. Mostly like how she like stands in the corner and watches him sleep, and who else would love you more than anyone in the world other than your pet who loves you unconditionally, kind of, I think is sort of the overall rationale for it. But there's a couple of videos. At first I was like, this seems insane, but there are a couple of videos, one of which my friend Shirley sent me, that kind of really has its own legal brief about this case, like to make this case that it actually is Sandy. But in particular, that the photo of the Polaroid of Nikki, and it says "not me" on the bottom, that is actually not just the real Nikki trying to like cry for help, but is actually like the spirit of Sandy being like, I'm a cat. so like, so the post-it note that says like, what is the verdict on cat, is actually asking about like, do you like trying to tell Bear that a cat is actually possessing Nikki instead. So I'm not actually doing a great job of outlining all the points. The stuff that I saw does a much more thorough job. But do you feel like this, first of all, how much credit can we give this theory? But also, like, if this is true that Curry Barker wanted this to be part of the story, do we think that changes anything about what it's doing or what it says?
I mean, I think credit for finding all the clues and building the case as it exists, even if you say you're not giving a good version. I'm intrigued by it. I would highly doubt that's intentional, but I do think there is something to, like, I did see this in when I was looking around just sort of letterbox reviews and some Reddit threads, neither of which are great places to get insightful comments necessarily, but that's what I had looked at. And within that, I did see people draw comparisons to being a cat, but they were sort of like, oh, whatever sort of demon fairy creature this is, some supernatural being is trying to figure out, like, what would a human do? Like, what is it that like this person would like? And it's like, okay, what do I know? I know that he has a dead cat and he's sad about that. Okay, what does a cat do? Well, a cat would do something like bring out a dead thing and present it to them in a shrine way and be like, look, don't you like having a shrine for something? And, you know, stuff like that. And then being like, oh, well, you want to be a food critic. Like, maybe you'd want to eat the thing that you cared about that died. Like, it was important to you. So, like, what do you think about that? And so that none of those are meant to be malicious. And so I do buy that it's never like this thing is trying to do something, you know, poorly, that it's trying to fulfill the request. It's trying to do its goal of being, you know, the most in love that anyone could ever be, but it doesn't know what to do. It just doesn't know the rules, and so it's trying to figure things out. To me, that makes more sense than like it's the cat, especially just because I don't think a cat would cook itself and put itself in the sandwich, and B, it's not a dog, it's a cat. So the cat doesn't love as much as like anyone ever could. The cat's like, I tolerate you. Like, I like you quite a bit. But also, if the human was like, I need some space, the cat will be like, yeah, that's cool.
Like, yeah, well, I think one of the
I think one of the points was like the cat that Nikki is so mad that he just threw the cat in the trash after she died, because it was actually her being like, hey man, like
sure.
But anyway, sorry, Sarah, I cut you off.
Oh, no, not at all. This is such an interesting theory. I'm not super persuaded by it, but I see the appeal of kind of puzzling that out. And I think there's one specific reason that I'm not persuaded by it, and I'm going to need a little runway to get there. I think there are two things kind of connected to this conversation that I want to bring up. And the first is, this is fundamentally a possession movie, right? Nikki is possessed by something, and the real Nikki is sort of put away somewhere else, while whatever this entity is kind of driving the ship. And as you were saying, PT, at first, this entity kind of doesn't really know how to drive the ship. Like, it's very awkward. And in that first conversation at his car, it's sort of like, you know, oh, my cat just died. I mean, your cat just died. I mean, what? Why am I being so weird? Right? And so the entity that's taking her over kind of has to get used to this humanness that it's trying to, you know, portray, and it gets better until it kind of plateaus and then, you know, tanks. It can't can't hold up the facade anymore after a while. So this is kind of a possession movie without all of the like Judeo-Christian baggage of like you're possessed by a demon, or like, we've got to like exorcise this or whatever, right? We don't get to that point, right? But that brings me to the second thing that I think this connects to, which is folklore. And there are a couple kind of folklore elements here that I think speak to the nature of this magic, right? And there's lots of folklore tradition where like wishing is an element, right? Kind of fairy traditions, or, leprechauns or jinns, or, other things like that, like kind of folklore elements that are connected to the natural world and that offer you wishes, but like in a tricky way. And that seems to be tapped into this kind of magic. Now, the store where he buys this willow is called the Green Man. And of course, the Green Man in kind of Celtic tradition is a symbol of like birth and rebirth and death and kind of cycles of the natural world and stuff like that, right? And then a willow, as far as I could tell, willows have had sort of different types of witchy associations with medicinal stuff, life and death, rebirth, kind of general pagan stuff. But they were in some cultures kind of hung up as like signs to kind of keep witches away or ward off evil or things like that. So anyway, these are kind of folklorically invested things that we see here. And my one piece of evidence for why I don't think this is the cat, and I do think it's some other entity that has taken over Nikki, is the pornographic story that she tells at the party, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important because I think it's sort of, this entity is sort of mapping over Nikki's actual feelings about Bear. Nikki feels like Bear is a little brother to her, right? So what does she do? She tells some pornographic Hansel and Gretel slash fic, slash fiction where they are, having sex with each other, right? So I think this is something that the entity that's taken over Nikki is doing in a kind of clumsy way to make sense of the sexual desire that it is supposed to feel for Bear, but coding it over, mapping it over Nikki's actual feelings for Bear, and it comes out as incest, which I think is evidence that maybe it's not the cat, right? Because I don't know why maybe, but I think the cat already has an established relationship with Baron, right? And we don't need to get down into like anything else, but this cat, I think, would have maybe a different framework for thinking about love and affection than maybe Nikki or whatever this thing is that's kind of mapping over Nikki does. So I don't know. I'm not super persuaded. I'd be open to looking at more cat-related evidence, but I think this is some sort of folkloric entity. And I think maybe to the film's credit, we don't need to ask any more questions about the origin of this magic, right? We don't need to like dissect the bird too much here, because I think the details really don't matter. It's magic. It worked. It happened.
The Jenga story prompt from the cat would have been a lot more lasagna based than Hansel and Gretel incest based. I loved all of that. I think that's all really great. I do think that is a key connection to like that, the input that he gets from, I forget if it's from Ian or if it's from Sarah, about like, I think it's from Ian via Sarah, is like, she thinks of you like you're a little brother. That really explains like what's happening in that scene. I think that is interesting. I do like that the movie doesn't try, like, I was a little worried the last like 20 minutes of the movie was going to be, we need to go to the factory where they make the blah, 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 or we got to find out, like, we got to go to the museum and look up all the history of whatever. I'd be like, don't explain it. And I think that's great. I think that works really well. And like another recent movie where breaking of a stick is key to making a spell happen. In the weapons, not trying to get too deep into like what's happening with the witch. Like there's a witch, just deal with it.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Her name's Gladys. Get into it.
Yes. My other piece of evidence, which is not really evidence, but just something else I want to say. But I will say this is partly why I'm like, I don't think that the cat thing was intended, although it's cool that like there's something there you can play around with, is when I got home, I was looking up one thing that I was like, I want to know what this meant, because I think this is important. The first time that right after the break, Nikki comes over and is like, I need to stay at your place. I'm sad. My dad, blah, blah, blah. And she's in the bed and he's like, okay, I'm going to go in the other room. And he's like, you should stay with me. When she's in the bed alone, the digital clock says it's like 12:08. And then when she's like, no, I want you to get into the bed with me, there's a bunch of shots of them together and the clock said 16:55. And I was like, what does 16:55 mean?
Oh.
And there are a ton of theories of what 16:55 means, including that was the first year that a court established in what is now the United States of America, ruled that someone could be held as a slave. And so they're like, ooh, it means something. And then I saw an interview with the person who did the props in the movie, and he said the clock broke. The clock was supposed to be something else. The clock was supposed to be that we couldn't fix it. And so we just let it run to be whatever the time was when we were filming it.
Well, that person should have kept their mouth shut.
And it was like, oh, okay.
Way to ruin it.
When you're talking about a movie made by a 26-year-old for under $1 million, and there's stuff that's happening in the background like that, it's possible it's just sort of like, it just happens to look that way. It just isn't really.
Yeah.
So, again, I love that idea that the clock is implying something about, owning slaves. And there were a couple of Bible passages from different books that were like, give up yourself for your, person, blah, 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 whatever, or give yourself up to the Lord and your soul will be redeemed. Stuff like that were, whatever book 16.
That seemed connected to
that seemed like, that could be what it's referring to. So I don't think folks should give up the cat idea, but I think this is part of what it's about. Theorizing about movies is sometimes you get your little headcanons of stuff you think is cool, but it's okay for that to not actually be the filmmaker's intent.
Well, it's also 1655 would have been in England during the interregnum when they instituted a witchfinder general.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if 1655 exactly, but they would have been under Puritans ramping up perhaps their witch finding a little bit.
I mean, what's happening in Salem in 1655?
Who knows? But probably plenty popping off in Europe.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. I love all your thoughts about this. And I actually at first I was like, this cat theory is so fun. But I actually do think that it would, if it were true, it would actually kind of undermine some of the other themes that we've been talking about a little bit, because it would be deflecting the sort of sinister nature of Bear's infatuation and desire to be in this, being so desperate to be in a version of this relationship, even if it is not consensual, right? And that I think if it's suddenly we're fixating on where does the magic come from, how does it work, and is it the cat because there are cat spirits in this world or what, then I think that starts to distract from what the movie is actually trying to get at in terms of the relationship between the two of them and how wrong what is going on is. And that said, I'm going to try to segue into one of the other things I wanted to ask about. So the other thing I learned about from going on the internet about this movie, and from my friend Shirley, who had been on the internet about this movie before me, is a lot of people are trying to connect Nikki's behavior to something called borderline personality disorder, which I didn't really know anything about, and still don't totally know a lot about since yesterday. But that this is a diagnosis that, a lot of people first are pointing out that a lot of the behavior she exhibits throughout the movie after the willow branch breaks is kind of aligned with symptoms that people with this disorder have, but that it is also has a history of being used by abusive partners to sort of cast women as hysterical and crazy, and therefore kind of gaslight them out of accusations of abuse. And again, this is just something I very superficially looked up and know about. So if listeners know a lot more about this, please share it with us. But was this on your radar at all? And sort of what do you feel like how much should people be reading into the actual behavior that Nikki exhibits that is quote unquote weird, right? And because I've seen lots of different takes on it.
Well, this gets into your earlier note about maybe bad interpretations of this movie, interpretations that take away maybe something, that maybe is reinforcing misogynist ideas, right? Because oftentimes we see narratives of predominantly men will get into relationships with women and say like, oh, she was crazy, she did this, she did that, she was so jealous, she was so possessive, she, did X, Y, and Z. And I think while I think it's absolutely correct to kind of interpret her behavior through a lens of like, that we might also use to assess mental health, right? This is a mental health break. This person is not Nikki, right? We might also say like, this is another personality that has emerged, right? But yeah, people who suffer with borderline personality often deal with sort of blowing very hot and cold, or bouts of real jealousy, paranoia, things like that. So Nikki's doing all of that stuff, except it's not Nikki, and it's an entity that's sort of wearing a little Nikki suit and parading as Nikki, and can't regulate its emotions because whatever this entity is, it's maybe not used to having normal human emotional dynamics, and it's just doing the best it can to sort of imitate what it thinks love looks like. And to some degree, I think we can also assume that this entity has access to Bear's mind and what he wants a relationship or wants love or wants a partner to look and feel like. Because again, the very first thing this entity says is, oh, my cat died. Oh, your cat died, right? So it can't fully differentiate itself from him at first, which suggests to me that it has access to his sort of brain and knowledge and memories in a way that's perhaps, connected to the wish of it all, right? So I think this is sort of parroting back to him what he, in his sort of dumb idiot mind, thinks a relationship looks like. And then it just sort of sours and turns malicious and turns toxic, because his idea of a relationship always was toxic and always was sort of built on these ideas about how it would serve him and not how it would serve her. So that's my short take on that.
I like that. I mean, also because I hadn't thought of it this way, but also if that sort of, we have this entity that is trying to do this, when in the montage, when things look like relatively happy early on, they're showing a meme of each other. I want to wear your skin like a sweater. That's kind of what the entity is doing with Nikki. That the entity doesn't really know, maybe doesn't know anything apart from the desires of the wisher. And that's interesting that like maybe what that means is like the degree to which you could look at what possessed Nikki does as abusive to Bear is the kind of abuse Bear would have done if he ever got into a relationship with someone in the state he was in. Like he would be that sort of manipulative and controlling, and then commit self-harm to in some way, probably not like a bottle to the face, but some sort of, way of getting attention and sympathy for himself to maintain the upper hand and maintain control. So I think that's really interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'm aware of borderline personality disorder. I don't know much about it apart from it being the core of one of the few excellent jokes in Ghostbusters 2. But I do think that people, and I'll echo, I guess, to a degree, something Sarah said. I think that if people are watching this and just being like, wow, like we should be diagnosing her behavior and like how weird she's being in this movie, is like not really understanding what is happening in this movie, and that it's not about what she is doing so much as like the situation that she is in and how that is reflective of or responding to the Bear, and was responding to the guy and what the guy has sort of set up. Assuming that everything is sort of set from that moment of the wish, it is sort of like what is in at his core, and then how he like never learns from anything that's going on of like, oh damn, I guess like this was a thing I did and I should be thinking about that. And I should definitely be doing whatever I can to stop this. Which is, I mean, I think that this is to Jen, you said, I think your theater wasn't very full. Again, mine was, I thought pretty full, but wasn't like more than a third full probably for the number of seats that were there. There were definitely times I was the only one laughing. And sometimes that was like me doing the like Polly Walnuts, like when I saw like, oh, she's in the corner, like I see her over in the corner. I don't think anyone else does. But like that's how I'm gonna react to like that being creepy, is laughing. But every time it was just like, what's the like solution for like breaking this? Is like, well, you could die, so you could kill yourself. And it's both the person on the phone and then later the guy who owns the store
in the store,
who's just sort of like,
guy.
well, yeah, you
That
can get
was
someone
great.
else to do a wish. Oh wait, or you can just kill yourself. I mean, that's always, you know, if you die, yeah, just kill yourself. That was funny every time, but it was also, I understand no one wants to kill themselves. Well, that's not true, unfortunately. But like people generally who want to keep living their lives don't want to kill themselves. But it's just like, I kind of feel like as soon as you hear that the first time, you need to start seriously contemplating that like, I need to sacrifice myself to get out of this situation and to give this person their freedom back. And he doesn't really ever do that until, again, he feels, I think he's trapped in that bathroom and thinks he has no other option.
Yeah, he's never ready to sacrifice himself to save her, right? To kind of, he is the reason that this has happened to her, right? He has imprisoned her and he can't bring himself to kind of do what might be an honorable thing at that point and set her free, given the only way that's been put before him is to take himself out of the picture.
Right. In fact, he kind of doubles down and is like, well, as long as I just keep what's actually happening from other people, maybe it'll be okay, which is so insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so it's very, I think to me, some of the most chilling moments in the movie were when they possess Nikki and Bear get in these conversations where it's so clear that he is being abusive to her, because he starts the way you could over rationalize it is like, well, she's a demonic, like she's like a demonic force that is possessing this person and has trapped him in this situation. But the moments where he finally kind of like responds to her behavior with like, can't you just stop talking, or can't you just stop that, or like, you know what I mean, like and the way he talks to her is so revealing in terms of like when he's made to be uncomfortable at all, then all of a sudden he just like snaps at her and talks to her in such a patronizing way that I think it's like so incriminating in those couple of scenes where they show that. But then also I think there's a way in which you could sort of see the movie trying to recontextualize. And this is why I was kind of like, if we call it a disorder, what she's doing, that again robs the movie or undermines what the movie's trying to talk about in terms of these gender dynamics. And because the movie in some ways recontextualizes her behavior as a product of being in this really imbalanced relationship where he has all the power and she doesn't have any. And that like from the outside, people were like, why is Nikki having a mental breakdown? Why is she acting so weird? But really it is all a product of the fact that Bear has her trapped in this situation and that all she's trying to do is please him. Right. And as we've talked about, it's to varying degrees of success. Right. But all she's trying to do is be what he wants to be. I can be. Doesn't she say that at some point in the movie? I can be whatever you want me to be.
Yeah.
Right. And his response is like disdain and to like yell at her.
And I mean, the chilling moments where the real Nikki pops out are so incredibly chilling. That was the jump scare that got me. The first time that they are making out. And she snaps back into herself and just jumps off the bed because she's all of a sudden in the middle of an assault and she doesn't know what's going on, right? And that moment got me 2 times. Both times it got me. And it's so horrifying that like we keep getting these chime-ins from the real Nikki. The screaming on the phone call, of course, is horrifying. But then that moment when entity Nikki is asleep and real Nikki is like, I need you to kill me because there's no other way out of this. And this is torture for me. And of course, Bear then makes that about himself, which is just further evidence on the charge sheet. So I think those moments where we see that real Nikki pop out, and of course it happens at the party when she harms herself, are so upsetting in such an effective way because we know and can feel that she is just trapped and cannot escape and has no recourse except to just scream into a void, right?
Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, I kind of want to go into thesis, please, because we've been working our way towards like declaring like what is it that this movie might be saying. I mean, we've said versions of it all along, I think, but just to kind of put a pin on it.
Thesis, please.
Okay, there we go. So, as I mentioned earlier, like I do think that compared to some other horror films, this does seem to have a lot more of an explicit thing to say. One, do you agree with that? And then two, if we do feel like, and the thing I kept going back to was our review about Zach Kreger was like, oh, people were like, oh, what is Weapons actually about? And he was like, it's just a horror movie, nothing to see here. And and PT thought he was just lying when he said that in interviews.
I was like, hey, got them an Oscar, so whatever.
Right.
A lot of money, so fine. But I don't think that's true.
But we were really working hard to be like, what is it the root of this film? What is it trying to tell us? Do we feel like the same thing is happening here? Is a little bit different? And if so, like, what do we think it's actually trying? What is the actual point of this movie? What is it trying to say?
Well, Jen, you are great at asking questions and then waiting, but I kind of want to throw it to you because I feel like your Letterboxd review, I thought had the answer. So
Agreed.
do you want to expound upon that?
Yeah. So in my Letterboxd review, I said that there's a lot of ideas in this movie, and I think we've talked about a lot of them and sort of shown the range of like things that you can kind of pull from the story that we have here. But I think ultimately what's kind of at the core of this movie is the idea that, and again, I don't want to throw Gen Z under the bus, so I'm not going to put this in terms of like it's about Gen Z, but that people, there are a lot of people who don't want to put in the effort and are not willing to do the work to create a real relationship with somebody, and actually make themselves vulnerable and put themselves out there and put in the work and actually like care about what the other person wants, right? That there's kind of like a modern day rejection of that. We don't want to have to do that in favor of these other more kind of superficial, meaningless, and oftentimes possessive relationships or like relationships that don't actually care about the person on the other end. And so there's actually a bunch of different directions you could go in with this. Like I saw a Letterboxd review of somebody who was like, I feel like this is about AI, but I can't really tell you how. And I think the way that you do that, the mapping AI onto this is this idea that like there are people now who like using an LLM to have a relationship with because they don't actually have to put any of the work in. It's like a frictionless, like, oh, I'm just like, and it's not real, right? So going back to the customer service call from Bear, he says, well, but is it real? And they're like, yeah, dude, the wish is real, obviously. And he's like, no. I mean, like, is her love real? And the guy's response on the other end of the phone is, well, just because you chose this for her doesn't make it any less real. So terrifying. Mm-hmm. And so I do feel like it's the existential crisis at the core of this movie is about like, what is a relationship? What constitutes a relationship? And what happens when people reject the idea that they have to do anything to have a relationship? So I don't know what you guys think about that, but
I mean, again, I thought it was great because I thought that's why I wanted you to say it, because I thought it was like going to lead us off really well. Because I do think there's something there. The only thing I have to add is I do think there is of the moment, of the time, generational component here that is the sort of Gen Z, the people who are right now in this mid-20s zone, that like they are dealing with this particular app dating, the last 10 years of politics in the world, and the lessons that have come from that have been since they were, early to mid-teens. And just the directions of culture, the pulls into different corners of the internet and how people sort of exist. So, obviously the manosphere, incel culture, and how like that is not, there's not like maybe a huge percentage of people who would say I'm in that, but how much of internet slang starts there and then comes out into the wider discussion. Anything maxing that you hear anyone reference is manosphere talk and is incel discussion. So, like that's all terrifying. I think that all does play into this. The only thing I will add is again, this is maybe just like memory of a distant past and to some degree experience. I do remember being between like my mid 20s to my early 30s, knowing people around me who were a little bit older or a little bit younger, and like feeling that it was like, like when people are like 27 was when they started to be like, what am I doing? Like, what's happening in terms of relationships? And sometimes other things too, like jobs and like, living situations and such, but it's particularly relationships where I sort of had cooked up this theory, at least maybe this is just the people around me, but across genders, across sexualities and, configurations of relationships, that there were just not everyone, but a lot of people who sort of had the, like, you go to high school, you finish high school, you go to college, you finish college, you graduate college. That's the last, you get a job, like you get a job somewhere, you start working, and maybe you don't stay at that job, but still you get a job, have a job, and then think about maybe long-term things. And then with that was like, get a relationship and get a partner and be with a partner. And it was this just sort of box to check and this status thing that you're supposed to do. And that seemed to lead to people making a lot of bad choices and dating people they didn't really like and they weren't really happy with, and making mistakes or following immediate attractions without thinking about like, this person's actually a piece of crap and I shouldn't be with them. But I'll stay with them for a year or two and figure it out. And you had to get to like your late 20s if you were going through that experience to be like, okay, maybe I should be thinking about actually making myself emotionally available and actually connecting with another person and trying to build something up. And, again, not everybody had that, but I feel like a lot of the people I knew and I was around in that time were, that was sort of the timeline, was you got to like, past your mid 20s, heading towards your late 20s, there was a shift that happened. And like, I was really thinking about that in the car scene with Bear and Sarah, when I was like, oh, like, in a different situation, this is a conversation that could be happening where Bear is like, oh, yeah, I've been so fixated on this idea of like, getting a relationship and owning this person and making this like, a dollhouse of a life that I thought I would have. But there's this other person that I'm really close with and they're being emotionally vulnerable. And like, he actually picks up on the suggestion. Like he says, like someone like you, which is like, oh yeah, like you're opening the door to at least like, maybe it's only her emotional vulnerability, but it's like, oh, maybe if this guy had not done something horrific, could he have grown out of this in a year or two? Maybe not. Maybe he's inherently cooked from the inside and there's no way he wouldn't have this problem. But it feels like there's something very mid-20s about this movie, which makes sense. The filmmaker's 26 and filmed it last year when he was potentially 25. That like, yes, this is when you're in that kind of casting around and not knowing. And then you add in Gen Z, you add in 2020s and all the world and culture around us. So I do think all of that is a part of it. And so it's sort of like trying to find a relationship now, being toxic, trying to find, not realizing how toxic you are because you think you're a good guy. You think you're one of the nice guys. But you don't think you're a quote unquote nice guy. And that's true in perpetuity. I think that's true for lots of people, lots of guys in their 20s, but I think it's particularly potent for what's happening now and how people are sort of boiling in this awful culture.
Yeah, I love all of that. I think those are really good observations. I want to just return to Bear for a second, because in that conversation with Sarah, she has this sort of career goal in mind, right? Bear doesn't seem to have any idea of what he wants, who he is. The only thing, the kind of defining feature of his personality is that he's in love with Nikki. And when Nikki, or the entity of Nikki, asks him at dinner, like, oh, like, what do you want to do with your life? He's like, I don't know, maybe food critic. And to the entity's credit, it's like, well, you put ketchup on your steaks. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not an answer. You don't know this? Like, you haven't thought about this at all. So a bear as a character seems to just not, he's not, he doesn't know himself well enough to be a viable partner to anybody, certainly, but he is at that time when you're sort of asking those questions and discovering things. It's just that he seems to have stunted that self-discovery by kind of this fixation on this one girl who he's loved for a certain amount of time, right? I think putting this into the context of this kind of what I've heard some think pieces call like vulnerability crisis, right? There's a lot of think pieces talking about like the kids don't go out and they don't dance anymore, and they're not like dating, or they're like dating in these sort of strange ways, and they're living too much either through LLMs or through their kind of social media, and they are not putting themselves out there in ways that are so important and so foundational to developing that sense of self. So I think we can see Bear as an example of that. Right? He does not know who he is. He has not put himself on the line in ways that make him that would make somebody figure that out, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's vulnerable to do. And so I think putting it in that context, which as we've all kind of hinted, directly connects to this sort of manosphere culture, because if you're a big, strong alpha man, you don't have to be vulnerable, and women are objects, and don't worry about that. So those are two kind of interrelated phenomena, but I think we do really see commentary here about the state of dating, the state of love, the state of romance, the state of vulnerability in this particular historical moment. And that's certainly broadly applicable beyond that. But I do agree that this is a sort of specifically situated movie with specific commentary. I think as we're thinking about thesis, we can also just throw on the plate. There are lots of stories, and PT, you hinted at this with this sort of Twilight Zone of it all, right? There are lots of stories where, like, if you try and take the easy road to get to something, like you make a wish, guess what? You're not going to get to that thing, or you're going to get to that thing in sort of a perverted, twisted way that isn't actually the thing you wanted, because you can't take the easy road to get to that thing, right? You have to take the hard road or you don't get there. So I think that's related, but more in keeping perhaps with just bigger tropes about kind of wishing and stories about making wishes.
And that's the other place the AI parallel clicks in, I think, too, because you could read Bear making the wish. I wish Nikki loved me more than anything else in the whole world. Snap, as someone putting a prompt into an LLM, and then the result is like highly mixed. And they're like, oh, is this really what I wanted? But so what's so disturbing about the whole movie, though, is that if you kind of look at it through that lens, he would still, even if like there's blood everywhere, and even if Nikki's screaming at people, and even if she's like peeing the carpet, and like all of these horrific things that we see throughout the movie, he's still at the end of the day, and this goes back to my original thesis, I guess, in some ways, like he's still at the end of the day would rather take the shortcut that does not ask anything of him than, quote unquote, put in the work to actually get the real thing and get the authentic version of what he's asking for when he snaps that branch. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think that is a big day, and like, not to pick on AI, right? AI is a big part of my professional life right now. So like, I don't mean to throw it under the bus completely, but in that specific usage of like, oh, why would I read this whole article if I can just have ChatGPT tell me what it is? It's that same mindset of he's trying to emotionally, like we talk about cognitive offloading with AI. This whole movie is about Bear trying to emotionally offload, having a relationship, right? And I think the through line of vulnerability is so interesting, because I can't quite put my finger on it, but there is something very interesting happening with vulnerability as either performative or real, and vulnerability as like emotional, like exploitative, because there's a whole like the idea of like, oh, like Bear thinks that, and I think this is partly why Possessed Nikki also responds this way, like the idea of like, oh, you're grieving, therefore let's make out. Like there's a weird thing happening there where like Bear and then Possessed Nikki like have this weird conception of like, well, that's how you get close to somebody, is by like like opening up to them and kind of like, but it's this weirdly like it's very grotesque in the sense that it's like taking advantage of somebody's grief or sadness and then therefore trying to like get a relationship out of it, I guess. I don't know. It's like vulnerability is like a weird currency in this movie that I don't totally understand.
Well, but much like AI, you have to know how to, if you're going to put something into AI and get some generated results, you have to know what's BS and what's not, right? You have to be a savvy reader and a savvy consumer. And a lot of times the people who are using a tool like that are not. And so they're getting the garbage with the, potentially viable stuff. And so when Nikki or entity Nikki kind of uses like, oh, my dad has cancer, he's dying, as a manipulation tactic, right? A kind of bad execution of vulnerability, right? And a lie, presumably. Bear's not savvy enough to like know the difference. And also, again, he doesn't know her well enough to know that like that wouldn't be a thing that would potentially be a so heavy for her, right? So it's about becoming a more savvy reader. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's sure. Almost it's sort of having actualized yourself and sort of like becoming your own person instead of just being some sort of like efficiency minded, goal oriented shark where you're just sort of I'm going to constantly moving towards the thing I think I should be doing. I'm not really going to like reflect or think about what's going on, which I do feel, at least like I feel like that's a thing I spend most of my time teaching classes, like trying to push back against, because there is such a drive to be like, just gotta get something done, move on, do the next thing, complete all my tasks. And it's sort of like I gotta maximize my time. And it's like, what are you maximizing your time for? Like, you're not doing anything. Like, so it's one thing if it's like boring class assignments, okay, that's fine, but like, why are you min-maxing your experience of like trying to land a girlfriend? That doesn't make any sense. Like that's what you want to save your time for, is to spend time with this person you allegedly care about. So I think the sort of way, sort of the headline is that like it is this sort of classical fable element of this sort of morality lesson that is, Twilight Zone. It is The Monkey's Paw. It is like an O. Henry story in its own way about like, the tagline of the movie, be careful what you wish for, is like, it's right there. But it is so uniquely positioned around these issues that you can read it as AI. You can read it as spiritual. You can read it as just pure emotionally abusive relationships, emotionally stunted men, or if we want to be too nice and extend it to like emotionally stunted young adults, because I'm sure there's women out there and there will like woman sphere versions of incel culture. I'm sure that exists, but that all of these things coming together as successfully as it does is why this movie keeps growing in a way that movies usually don't. People are like, you got to watch
it's
this.
hitting a nerve.
Yeah, even if they're not like all explaining it to their friends as like, you got to go and do this. Like, I feel like I was the oldest person in the theater last night. Granted, it was 11:15 at night on a work night, and reasonable adults were in bed. But it was a lot of people who looked like they were between like 15 and 30 who were there in the movie, very excited to be there. And I think there is a reason why this is resonating.
And the womanosphere is mostly like crafting tips and recipes and like light witchcraft.
I mean, that sounds
low-key
delightful.
Witchcraft. It's actually it's nice. It's pretty nice. Yeah. I just to touch on the kind of monkey's paw of it all again, because I read an interview where kind of Curry Barker and Zach Kreger were talking with each other just about their inspirations and stuff like that. He said one of his inspirations for this was the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode that deals with the monkey's paw.
I love that.
So this is coming from the Simpsons-averse too.
Yes.
That explains why I laughed so much.
The Frogurt is also cursed.
I do want to do a quick Oscars watch because we do have to wrap up in a couple minutes. Obviously, there's so much more that we could talk about with this. We could keep going, and I think that is what makes this movie really worthwhile. And watch out for the people out there who are like, yeah, this movie is so great. It took my crazy girlfriend and turned her into a horror movie. That's not what we
Oh
want.
yeah, break up with
Boo.
them. Like, and don't be
Yeah.
friends with them.
Yeah.
Real
That person
quick,
goes to jail.
I know we heard I know we heard Sarah's jump scare moment. Anyone want to add creepiest,
Oh, where
most
we
unnerving moments?
for me, it's probably when she's in the corner.
I love that.
And then there's it's that scene, and then there's one other scene where she like walks, like she runs backwards.
Yeah.
So that's the scene
Mm.
for me, because it's she's on the floor and he is like he's going for his boys' night with Ian, and she jumps up and it's like it's just backwards, tape run backwards.
Yeah.
Of her going back and then getting into the shadow in the kitchen and having that whole monotone speech about killing herself. About how it's just like it'll be warm and then it'll be cold, and doing all of that. That is like, I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like,
And then
this
she
is
pauses.
excellent.
She pauses and
Or
goes,
you could
"Or you
just
could stay."
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh.
The degree to which this film hinges on her performance, I think that it's hard to overstate how powerful and great her performance is. And I think, PT, we both sort of pinged on the Sam Raimi of it all. Her possession is almost kind of like a Deadite possession, where like it's a little bit funny.
Yes.
Like the moving backwards is very unhinged and unnerving, but it's also like you're kind of laughing and being like, what?
Yeah.
Right. What is happening right now?
Yeah.
I definitely said that a lot while I was sitting there. And there's a certain degree of unpredictability, which is so terrifying, right?
Yeah.
Where you really don't know what she's going to do next.
Crazy broads.
Because that's the soundbite. Let's clip that and put that on social media. I do. Maybe the way that we can talk a little bit more about her performance is, could it get an Oscar nomination? Hopefully, Greg is proud of me for that segue. He's usually the segue master around here.
Yes.
But obviously, like, horror has, as a genre, made a big strides in the past few years, right? With The Substance and Weapons. Can you tell that's why those are the horror movies I've watched? Sorry, but you know, and so is it reasonable to hope and expect that this movie could pick up? That Indy Navarrete could get a nomination or be a part of the conversation, at least for I guess she probably would be classified as supporting actress, which would be, and then everyone would be like, it's category fraud. But and by people I mean me. But so yeah, what do you think? Does this have, or do you feel like this is not rising to the level of those movies in terms of the prestige or the Oscar awards chances?
I was just gonna say, I don't see a lot of possibility here. I think with Weapons, look, horror movies can sometimes sneak into that kind of writing category, so that's possible. But I think for performance, I think with Weapons, Amy Madigan was sort of a known entity, and you know, there was desire to kind of give her an award for being like a fun weirdo for, you know, the last however many years. With Indy Navarrete being a new face, I don't know. There's possibilities she could like win some lower tier awards, or at least get nominated for some lower tier awards, and, you know, horror specific awards like the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. So she'll maybe snag that. But no, I mean, I don't hold out hope unless this continues to do the kind of box office it's been doing. In which case, then people might start to kind of pay it more serious attention. But that's just my kind of skepticism.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's reasonable to hope. It is very much not reasonable to expect, because I don't think it's likely, but I think it's something to be, you know, it wasn't likely when we did our Weapons episode that Amy Madigan would get nominated.
We were like, no
way. Maybe this would get a screenplay. And it was like, no, it probably won't do that. And it still should have gotten a screenplay. But anyway, at least a nomination. I don't know, not the win, but a nomination. So, you know, I think it's fair. I think I didn't even consider that she could be running in supporting, because she's clearly the lead actress of this movie. Like, she's in too much of it, but whatever. You're right. Like, they could say like, well, no, Bear's the main character, she's supporting, it would be category fraud, but yet here we are. So it could be, you wait and see until, November, December. And it's like, what is it looking like? Is there a category, either lead or supporting, that's a little light? Could there, is it like we got 3 for sure nominees, but then we don't know the other 2? Then could it start to be that, like, what about this movie? Everyone really liked it. It was really took off. It made all this money. Da 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 da. Like, then, that could be, that could be a big deal. And it could be something that gets a little bit of momentum. But I think Demi Moore and Amy Madigan were veteran performers who had not. I mean, Amy Madigan got 1 nomination 40 years ago, but for the most part had not been getting recognized.
Right.
It felt like, these were interesting performances from performers that folks wanted to kind of give an award to.
They had the career, it's time narrative going
the
for them. The
25-year-old who was on Superman and Lois doesn't have that yet.
Yeah.
Like, was like the 5th tier character on a Superman show that people barely recall existed. She's not there yet. This is the breakthrough. So, could, if it is, there's no chance for Oscars and they're just like, fine, whatever, throw her into musical comedy Golden Globes, maybe like she could get nominated there if there's not a lot of other things going on. I think it'll be more like, we'll get 5-10 years down the road and be like, can you imagine, like, they didn't even recognize, they didn't even think about that kind of a performance. Some critics groups will sprinkle some love for this.
Indie spirits.
Maybe indie spirits. It is definitely indie. I wonder if, like, this could get some sort of sound awards, because I feel like the sound
That's
of
a
it
good question.
is
The sound is
something
incredible
interesting.
here.
Yeah.
But
the little, like, jingle when you snap the willow branch and the use of that in the final scene.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, so
It's
good.
great.
Because you immediately know what's going on, even though it's off screen. It's just
And that's something else Barker and Kreger were talking about in that interview, was just the importance of sound. And like, if you have an okay shot, but the sound is like pristine and gorgeous, it can really make everything feel so much more elevated. And I think this movie really accomplishes that.
Yeah.
Also, just again, the way that Indy Navarrete is contorting her face when she's smiling, or that like the frowny face.
Yes.
Part to the point where I'm like, is that a special effect, or is she actually doing that with her face? Like, I thought that several times throughout the movie.
Well,
it's just so creepy.
I will put into the chat. I'll leave it to Jen whether she wants to put this into the notes. I did see a post in my brief period of researching, done by one of the makeup artists, that like when she would stand in the corner, they would use this uncanny valley TikTok trend type of makeup to like make it that when you put her in the shadows, it does look like it's not really her face is so distorted, but it wasn't, it was no special effect besides lighting and makeup.
That's awesome.
But like they do that, and then you add in that even when she's just purely in light, she can pull these different faces and do these switches from, like when those moments happen when like the real Nikki comes through and her face just completely changes to be something else. It's a great performance, and then very low tech. I don't even call it like effects work. It's low tech craft work to get this to look a certain way and be really effective.
Good old fashioned movie magic.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have to wrap up, but conversation has been absolutely amazing. Sarah, tell folks where they can find you, and I think there's only one place, perhaps, much like Antonio when he's here, or anything else you want to plug or shout out.
You can find me on Letterboxd, Sarah E. Hastings, and I'm mostly reviewing horror movies. So if that's what you like, come on over. And that's it. There's nowhere else you can find me.
And PT, where can folks find you and the show?
Yeah, well, you can also really only find me on Letterboxd. I'm at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. The show is also on Letterboxd at LTR Pod. You can also look for the show on some social media sites like Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You can email us, thelongtakereview@gmail.com. You can call our customer service line, and we will play the screams of the movies that are trapped in unreviewed spaces. Or you can just follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Add, like, subscribe, heart, whatever the mechanism might be. And then you'll get updates on new episodes, what's coming down the road. It's almost Spielberg season. We're approaching up onto Disclosure Day. Greg, do you want to talk from the past and plug anything?
I should have him record offline, just him screaming like he's on the phone in the movie.
Yeah.
And then
do you want to talk to Greg? Would you like to speak with him?
Anyway, you can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, or on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jinn. I feel like we've used up all the good. Greg screaming. Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. You will also receive occasional written reviews of new Star Wars and Marvel.